I will start with step one, which is to create and tell the engaging future story of your organization. Because I think that narrative plays well to what we work well with humans. Humans love certainty, right? When we've got a sense of certainty or direction, we can function. We kind of know where we're going. We're going in that direction, great, let's go. But without that story, it falls apart. And I think the important part about that story, or the multiple parts that are important about that story, is people have to be able to see themselves in that story. It has to be relatable. And it has to be grounded in some sort of reality. Whilst it's a future story, you've got to ground it in some reality. We've got to tell the story of today, what we'd like, and how we're going to get there, and help people make sense.
Welcome to Narrative's Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome Deroy and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome Deroy, CEO of Narrative.
I'm Julienne Ryan, and I know this is going to be another great episode with you and our latest guest.
Yes, very much looking forward to it. Thanks, Julienne, for being back with me as my co-host. And before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast, Leadership Story Talks, leave a review wherever you find your podcasts, and check out also our YouTube channel. It's called Narrative, N-A-R-A-T-I-V, just like the company. And you can also find in this episode's notes many resources and links. And you can also go to narrative.com, narrative.com/podcast, where you will find our archive of episodes completely for free, of more than 150 episodes at this point. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest today. Is Andy Goram, also sometimes known as the Sticky Guy. Andy's on a mission to help people have more fulfilling work lives and create stickier organizations from the inside out. That's organizations who hold on to more of their talent and naturally attract new talent too. After nearly 30 years in various corporate leadership roles, he swapped the comfort and stress there for life as a culture, leadership, and engagement consultant. As part of his work, he hosts the popular Sticky from the Inside podcast, which I had the immense privilege to be on. And he talks to guests from around the globe on those topics. And he's a volunteer for Engage for Success, which is the UK's leading voice on employee engagement, where he co-hosts their long-running weekly radio show. Well, thank you so much, Andy, for being on the show. Welcome.
It's so lovely to be on the show and to see you again. And first time for us to have a chat, Julienne. So looking forward to this.
So am I. Yeah. You had me at Sticky Guy. I was like, what? I need to know more. So thank you for coming.
Yeah. Lots of great terms in that bio. My favorite is inside out. I love that too. Just so yeah, we're going to get into that. Before we get into all the details of that, I want to ask you the question that we ask of all of our guests from the top, which is, what is an experience, Andy, that you've had that has shaped who you are today? In other words, still influences you somehow, informs perhaps even your work. Can you tell us about that?
I mean, I think I've been one of those lucky guys. I've had so many moments along the way. I could start at one of my first Saturday job working in a bakery and getting my backside kicked around a very small kitchen by some elderly women who were very passionate and taught me work ethic. But I think the thing that still stands out for me, and maybe I was with a group today and it sort of came out in that there was a time in my corporate career quite early on, but I'd had quite a bit of success. You know, it seemed like every few months and there's a new opportunity and a piece coming through for me for a bit of promotion. And I really believed my own press. It was retrospectively horrible looking back at my behavior. I really swanned around that place thinking I was something very, very special. And no one ever called me out on that either. And then one day I had a new manager And I didn't really like him very much. He was quite small. For those of you of my age, he had a kind of Leo Sayer perm kind of going on with his hair. And in our
God.
one-to-ones, he would use a laptop, which was like completely uncertain. He would tap very loudly on his notes. Anyway, I walked into my first one-to-one. He'd been in his business about 6 weeks. And his opening salvo to me was, right, Andy, sit down. You are going to disappoint me and let yourself down if a few things don't change. And in that moment, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I went red. I was angry. In my head, I could hear myself saying, who do you think you are? By the way, do you know who I am? I mean, that's a bad place, right? When you start talking about yourself like that. But in the course of a conversation where it was so direct, but incredibly personal and supportive, I went from that anger and affrontedness to feeling really embarrassed and seen. And I left that conversation like I got to change. And I truly believe that intervention changed the absolute trajectory of my career. And later in life, when I was having a tough spot, I tracked this guy down and tried to have a conversation with him about this life-changing moment. And when I spoke to Richard, and I said, Rich, remember that conversation where you changed my life and changed my career? And he's like, no, Goro, I don't. And I'm like, what do you mean? This is kind of life-changing moment stuff, Rich. Surely you remember this. He says, listen, Goro, I love the fact that you had that kind of experience. I love the fact that there was some impact and it changed for you. But it's my job to tell you this sort of stuff. I would have told anybody that
Brilliant.
stuff. And that's been such a big thing for me. So, one of my core values now is definitely, I want to be known as a kind person, not a nice person, because I think a kind person will tell you really what you need to hear, give you the chance to grow, to change. Whereas nice people will maybe couch that and protect you and unknowingly suppress that sort of stuff, So that's something for me. That's a big experience for me.
Mm.
So shout out for your boss right now, your former boss. The fact that I always say these conversations are data. And the fact that, as special as you are, Andy, that he did not remember you. You were probably, and given his style, one of hundreds of conversations that he had along those lines. He remembered you. He took your call, which is something, but he didn't remember the specifics. So that says something where, it was a blended thing. It was just part of the person's being and fiber. It was not a unique conversation. That's how he motored through his life every day. I'm going to make a wager that was him. Modus
Yeah.
apparatus.
Absolutely. It was a unique conversation for me because no one had ever called me out on my behavior. For him, standard. And I think that's the thing I try and impress upon people today when we're in workshops talking about this sort of stuff is you can never underestimate the impact of whatever you say, whether it's a corridor chat or just a bumping into someone in a cafeteria or you're sitting down and having a meaningful one-to-one. Everything as leaders we say has some kind of impact. And we can't determine what that's going to be. We can go into those conversations, I think, with an outcome in mind. But sometimes the throwaway comments might be the thing that really, really lands and invigorates with someone. So I think, for me, that's been a big impression. And I'd run through brick walls for leaders before, but none of them had ever held me up or held me to account on my behavior. And when I look back, those people went missing in big, big moments. This guy never did, and has had the biggest impact at that point in my career for sure.
Well, we need to clone that person.
Yeah. Well,
and you're helping that too. Sorry, Jerome. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story because I think it also shows a couple of different things for me. One is just a reminder of the power of a well-told story. I mean, when he's about to say when he said to you what he said and kind of called you out, and you're going to disappoint me and you're going to let yourself down. It was interesting because you said that your hairs on the back of your neck started to extend it. And for me, it was the same thing. That actually happened to me because I knew, something is going to happen here. There's a confrontation about to happen for different reasons, obviously. But that's just the power of a really well-told story. So well done. And then the second thing was just that out of that came one of your values that you still
Hmm.
hold dear today, to be kind, and the difference between being nice and kind. And that's something that we see a lot in our work, Julienne, right? Like you, the stories that we tell represent something. We don't just tell a story for the sake of telling a story. It's because it means something to us, and there's something at the core of us, and usually it's tied to some kind of value that we hold dear, or some kind of guiding light. And I love that you called that out, that, this is how you came to this value of kindness, and what you mean by that. So really, we're off to a great start here. And I want to get into, so I know that that's the story that's shaped who you are today. And I get all of that. And I'm assuming, and I know that you then decided at some point in your career to switch gears quite drastically,
Hmm.
and to become this consultant that focuses on these areas. And I guess I've the first question I want to ask about that is, how did you come to those particular areas of employee engagement, leadership development? Why those areas? And I'm assuming what could be a multitude of different things you could have
It's a great question,
done.
because it took me a long time, because when I initially sort of left, because I think I just got into a bit of a cycle after doing the last MBO and looking around the exec table, and I was the last guy left from that group, and a succession of CEOs coming through to ask me to do the same sort of stuff. And I found myself in that kind of quandary of wanting to be the good guy, but feeling like I'm saying, no, we can't do that. We've been through that. We try that again. So I wasn't the right guy for that organization at that stage. So I wanted to leave. I came out with, I lived my career as a marketer. So I came out thinking I'd do marketing consultancy, work for myself, do some stuff. And I realized pretty quickly how rubbish I was at marketing. Because in your career, when
Okay,
you
well,
start
that's
directing, right, you get further away from that skill, and your job is something very different at that point. My job was about creating an environment for people to sort of like be able to perform. And so that didn't last very long. And so then I looked at what I was really doing. And I think in my marketing career, and maybe other people empathize with this, but I found myself sitting in between marketing, operations, HR, and the customer, trying to find the
Mhm.
truth that aligned all four of those things. And I spent millions, probably billions of pounds in my marketing career trying to understand and get customers to buy from me, buy another thing from me, stay with me, recommend me to others. And 2/5 of nothing on engaging an audience inside my organization who would often sell that stuff or be the face of that brand with our customers. Until the moment I woke up to that and did it, I missed all the joy that comes from that. The amazing things where people really get what it is you're trying to do, and then do things way beyond what you imagine to deliver that. And so if I look back, and I had some great help from some people sort of like questioning me and coaching me through trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Actually, my whole career had been about culture and engagement and communication. And whilst I've made loads of mistakes, trying to be a decent leader. So actually, when I look back, it was far less about campaigns and far more about connection. And I think that's the sort of red thread, if you like, through the things that I do today. I bring a brand lens, I guess, to people stuff, which I think is nice and different. It's not tarnished with HR baggage and stuff like that. And culture is not the bastion of HR. It's everybody's business, right? And I think my focus on customer and understanding and people and connection and communication is a good way to look at this stuff, right? We're
Mm.
humans. We're wired for connection. How do we best connect with people to get the best from them? And I love that work. I feel like I'm living my best life now.
Yeah, that's
Terrific.
awesome.
I love that you focused on, like like you did with your customer products and everything. What's the core? What's the core of what you need to be doing for yourself, which is a different customer to have when it's different when it's the objective product, but when it's us in our career, it's challenging. So that was quite a journey, but you gathered information, you did all the right things for that. But I love what you just said. I think you should put that in a poster board, on the street, that engagement does not belong just in HR. It's not on
Correct.
a PDF in the hallway. It's everywhere. It has to be in various habitats and reinforced in a variety of different ways. And the people carry that message. And you can tell when you walked in the back of the day when we visit a company, you could tell just by the smell and the look of the reception area, what the vibe was, how the energy was, and it still occurs. So I like the fact that you're on a mission to
I am,
tell
and
people that.
it's heaven and hell, Julienne, right? Because
Yeah, I
there are
know.
businesses that want this and like it and don't know how to do it, and they are great to
Yeah.
work with. And then there are guys ticking boxes, and
Mm,
that can be really difficult and frustrating. Or we've got these values, we want you to bring them to life. Can you
mm,
maybe put some videos together? And I'm like, well, we're talking about a campaign here. A video, that's a tiny part of the mix here. What's really going to make values work and be embedded in a business is for you to show how important they are, for you to show how they show up every day, for you to catch the stars that are doing those things, for you to hold account the people that aren't doing those things, for you to start to bring more rigor into behavior that aligns with the values as well as you would financial performance. We can do playbooks and stuff like that. That's great. That's a launch campaign. That's not how you embed and change culture. That's a deeper effort. That's a stand up, be counted, and be serious about this sort of stuff, which is the thing that kind of sometimes either really engages and excites a CEO, an MD, or a company, or makes them go, yeah, no, we'll just do a poster. Thanks very much. And
Mhm.
yeah. Well,
yeah, and then different things
simple
happen, right?
things. Simple
Yeah, yeah,
things like try saying hello, paying attention, engaging on a human to human level too. So,
There's a scary
yeah,
stat. I'm
good for
sure it's the
you.
same. I'm sure it's the same way you are, but we've got about 66% presenteeism within UK employees. So people are 2/3 of the workforce are there. They turn up, they do a job. That's about it. And I don't like stats that match stats, but there's another 2/3 of those 2/3 that have never shared their best thought, efforts, or ideas because they've never been asked.
Mm, wow.
Sadness or what? One
Yeah.
engaging conversation, making people feel like it's okay to contribute and for us to listen to those things. And when you're trying to transfer ownership for stuff with people, it's much easier to have someone take ownership for something that's come from them than try and
Mhm. Mhm.
impose something on somebody, because that stuff just bounces off. We never quite connect to it enough. So it just stands to reason why you wouldn't engage and talk about that stuff. But then there are so many middle managers who are not equipped or trained or have the confidence to know how to engage with their teams to even elicit that sort of conversation, which again, sad, because we're wired for conversation and connection if we just open it up.
Yeah.
But sometimes people need a bit of help with that.
Yeah,
Mm,
well, I want to get into that because that's what you help people with, and I know you have a particular framework. I'd love
Mhm.
to hear more about what that framework is, and maybe you can even give us an example. I know there are 7 steps, but yeah, what are when you go into an organization and they're the former that you describe, the ones that are excited, the ones that want this stuff to happen, that are interested in culture. How do you approach that with this framework?
The framework, and we'll leave a document right with the
Yes.
podcast to kind of lay that. There's 7 steps. We probably don't have time to go through all 7. I would say these 7, they're not unique in isolation, but I think whilst they may be common sense, there's no way all of them are common practice. And I think this is the joy of the stuff that we do. The sad thing is, someone says, how long is this going to take? I don't know. Every organization is different, right? I can't tell you that, which again puts some people off. But I will start, and maybe this is a bit meta for your podcast, but I will start with step 1, which is to create and tell the engaging future story of your organization. Because I think that narrative plays well to what we work well with humans. Humans love certainty, right? When we've got a sense of certainty or direction, we can function. We kind of know where we're going. We're going in that direction. Great. Let's go. But without that story, it falls apart. And I think the important part about that story, or the multiple parts that are important about that story, is people have to be able to see themselves in that story. It has to be relatable. And it has to be grounded in some sort of reality. Whilst it's a future story, you've got to ground it in some reality. We've got to tell the story of today, what we like and how we're going to get there, and help people make sense of how they contribute in that journey. It's not the question of just telling the one story. That story's got to be repeatable, right? It's got to be in a lovely frame that allows people to go and tell it in their own words. I often run workshops when we're trying to do this sort of stuff. So we take the CEO, he comes in, tells the story, and the best bit of that process is I then kick them out the room. Whenever you kick a CEO out of the room, that's just a joy. And then everybody else in that room gets a chance to pick that story apart, pick out what they meant. And what's fascinating in every room is immediately you start to see little cigarette paper differences in people's interpretation of what's been said and what's been subsumed by the consciousness. And what I then do is we pull all this together and all the questions that brings out, and you bring the CEO back in, and immediately you can start to sort of say, right, here's some questions we've got. This didn't quite match up. Is this what you meant? Blah, blah. And we give the opportunity to play straight back what was meant by that. And so instead of 50, 60, 100 people walking out the room with very different interpretations of what that message and that story is about, you walk out with 50, 60, 100 people out that room going, hey, I know where we're going. And I've had practice and fun today telling that story in my own way. So when I go back to my people, I'm not reading out somebody else's story. I'm telling my version of that story, which you will hear better, you will connect to, because it feels like me telling that story. And then we're off. Then we're off and running because people have that sense of certainty. I think storytelling is wonderful. Jerome, we had a lovely conversation about storytelling in business. I think it has to come with some warning, though, because we have to be really clear about what our intention is. I don't know whether you've heard the story of penguins and elephants before. Have you heard the story of penguins and elephants?
No.
There's a great story that I end up using. I nicked it off somebody else because I thought it was a great story. I'll magpie anything, Julienne. I don't care if it works. It works, right?
Fair warning there.
so I think there's a classic story of a CEO stood up to launch his new culture to the business, like, you know, at the fanfare, the conference, stands up. I'm going to tell you a story of penguins and elephants. Okay, he says, penguins in a big long waddle work their way across the Antarctic, right? Pace by pace, they work their way to the new nesting ground. And the thing about penguins and the waddle is they're only as strong as the weakest penguin. And when penguins become ill or slow, infected, close to dying at the back of the waddle, other penguins will leave the waddle, go to the back of the waddle, kill those penguins dead so the waddle can move on. Those are the penguins. He says, there are also elephants. Elephants moving to new grazing grounds across the savannah. They'll move as a big family, as a big herd. If an elephant should become ill or sick or, God forbid, die, the elephants will gather around, wait with the other elephant until it recovers. Or should that elephant die, there'll be a period of mourning where the herd stays before they move on. This is in business. There are penguins and elephants. And what I want to proclaim today is that we as a company, we are the penguins. And at that moment in the auditorium, there's this kind of like shock silence, whilst some people are going, do we cheer at this point? Do we applaud? Do we run scared into the hills? What do we do? And what ensued over the course of the next 6 months in that organization was this thing about cigarette paper differences causing massive problems, because the interpretation of that story was everyone's out for themselves. The fittest wins, backstabbing, throwing people under a bus, anything to do to get forward, right? That's what we do. The intention of the CEO behind that was, hey, we don't stop for anybody. We push forward through crisis. We just move. Instead of a kind of like forward-thinking, push organization, he got a very divisive, horrible culture, no humanity at all. And within 6 months, big problems, 12 months, massive problems. In his heart of hearts, he thought he was telling a story that really would galvanize the culture that he wanted. But the way it was interpreted completely undermined his intention. So we can come up with wonderful metaphor and lovely story, but we've got to be really sure about what we're intending to be here. And I think that sense-making element is so important before you kind of release the hounds, as it were, with this sort of stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences, right? You know, so stories are important, but they do come with a health warning if you haven't road tested it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sure.
No, and I mean, I know that we say this often, is context really matters. And yes, the intention and you know, have you tested your story out to make sense of it? And so that's why I like your process a lot, Andy, what you described, because CEO comes into the room, tells his or her story, leaves the room, everyone interprets the story, adds to it, develops it. CEO comes back into the room, gets to hear all that. I love that because it really mirrors the process that we go into when we teach people how to tell stories
Hmm.
between the listeners and the storytellers. So it's very important to us to have the storytellers and listeners in the same room so that the storytellers can listen to the listeners, and then also that the listeners will, have stories that are kind of being triggered in their own minds because of the stories they're hearing. So story begets story. So yeah, I love that, and I love that word of caution as well. I think that's really important.
And what you're doing is because there's story fatigue. Like in the narrative methodology, we talk about each experience. When you share a story, it could be, we pull out stories from our background. We've told it many times, but the room shapes it, the listeners. But what you're doing is preventive medicine, because a lot of times things get announced and discussed at the very top, and they're reiterated and they're reiterated. So by the time they get down to the middle management or to the town halls, they've told it so many times they've forgotten the nuances and some of the context that's missing, the whys that, how does each of those people fit in the stories? And there's no handbook to say, well, how this is how we're going to connect the dots. So like your penguin, you're creating this stress like, well, that's great, big picture. Where the heck does it mean for the rest of us? So
Yeah.
that story fatigue is is as important as the right story. That who have you talked to, and could that other groups really mimic or mouth back what you really want them to be thinking about and saying to others? So
Yeah,
very interesting
I,
process.
I often
Hmm.
hear CEOs or MDs end up frustrated, which is why we're having the conversation. So I've told the story. I don't understand why they don't get it. And well, we haven't had a chance to make sense of it. We haven't had a chance to play with it. We haven't had a chance to
Hmm.
personalize it. At the very end of that workshop, we go from a 2-minute telling of that story to about a 30-second telling of that story. We just keep breaking it down so we get to the real nub and the breadcrumbs. We use the Three Little Pigs as a kind of guideline to sort of say, hey, it's about the milestones within a story. Where are your Three Little Pig milestones? What do you rely on? And can you get that story down to 30 seconds? And if you can tell that story in 30 seconds in a repeatable way, you nailed it. You're on, you're away. Dead easy.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I'm, excuse me, interested also in, that you've described in previous conversations kind of the engagement journey, and that, different organizations are at different points in that journey. And I'm curious if, from your perspective of, having worked on this for a while and in this field for a while, if you've seen any patterns in terms of those that kind of, you know, for lack of a better term, or maybe I'm oversimplifying, but that are kind of getting it right, and those who fall short. Like what makes the difference, do you think, on that engagement journey?
I mean, there are, God, goodness me, there are so many patterns. But if I could pick out one, maybe two linked, is I think everybody wants to start too fast and too big. They want change, and because we need it, it has to happen now. And I do an exercise when I'm doing any change thing where I ask people to kind of smash their hands together, interlock their fingers, have a thumb resting on top of the other, and there's normally, you have a comfy position like left thumb or right thumb, right? And then I'll ask people to bring their hands back together and put the alternative thumb on top, and feel that uncomfortableness of change. And then we'll repeatedly try and put the old thumb back on top, nice and easy. And then I will get them to repeatedly try and think about consciously putting the weird thumb on top, which after about 10 goes, all of a sudden doesn't feel so weird anymore, right? And I think the thing around culture change is we try and take on too many things and engage with too many things at once. The first thing, I think people who get it right focus on the absolute foundation behaviors that are going to move the business forward. And ideally, what they also do is they find the connection between the things, the behaviors that really drive the business and also drive the people within it. If you can find that sort of magical connection, you are on your way. And I think it's getting down to some very simple common language that you can absolutely consistently, relentlessly get behind to reward and hold consequence to if it doesn't happen. I think in relation to that, though, where I see the biggest consistent problem is momentum in culture change is incredibly important. And in the worst cases, everybody is waiting for somebody else to make the change. We're fine. If that lot over there could change, everything works. Or, well,
Absolutely.
if the CEO changes or if the exec changes, we're all cool. And that is not how culture change or engagement change works. It's a requirement for everybody to take accountability. And I use the metaphor of sorting out your own pond first. I like to think about those spheres of concern, influence, and control that we have. And in the areas of control and influence, I want to focus on the things I can do to make my pond function as well as it can. So my pond becomes so attractive in our organization, no matter what else is going on. Other people are looking at our pond going, hey, why can't we have a pond like that? I want some of that pond. And people come and look at your pond and see what's going on and go, right, I'm going to take a piece of that. We're going to have a slightly different pond, but it's going to function in the same sort of way. And I think where I see organizations get it and organizations fail is in this courage to get on with it, to be really clear about the things that are important and then make some moves. I don't mind. I often use the word I don't care. I care deeply. I don't mind if they make mistakes and things that happen. I just want them to show this stuff is important, because until we show that this stuff is important through praise and correction, no one's going to bother. No one's going to make the change. No one's going to see the benefit. It's back to that old bell curve of the law of diffusion of innovation. We need to go where the sunshine is to get the energy from the people who want it, get it, and are on board, because they're going to be the proof case for everybody else. So it takes people to do things, you know. I've seen silly little things like meeting cultures change in business through one person's actions over a course of 3 weeks consistently, turning up to meetings, you know, at the start and saying, I'm here till 10 a.m. I'm booked in this meeting till 10 a.m. and 20 minutes to go. I'm going to be leaving in 20 minutes, just to let you know. And at 1 minute to 10, thanking everybody and getting up and walking out the room. And when that initially happens, people are like, how rude. She is not going to last here. What an idiot. And then in 3 weeks' time, everybody's kind of in the mode of, hey, well, if Lisa can do it, why can't I do it? And bang, we're off. We've got a chain reaction of things kind of going on. That's not anybody being rude or nasty or divisive. That is, what are we trying to do here? What's important behavior? Let's get behind it. And so I think that's, in a very simplistic nutshell, that's what I see where it works and where it doesn't work in culture change.
I love maybe people. I know what it's like here in the States, that there's always this desire for the Hollywood ending. Like, we want to change, there's a disruption, and let's cut to the ending where everybody's doing something different, instead of saying there's a lot of gritty bits in between. And one of the best expressions I learned decades ago, and I was like, right, took graduate classes and the rest of it, and I was with Supply Chain Initiative, is from the grass up. My Japanese friend in Tokyo was listening to what I was describing when I was writing or exchanging information with her. And I thought it was so helpful, because sometimes we're looking for change to come over there or from the top. And that expression served me well, because I could just maybe influence the pod on the floor and saying, okay, this crowd is moving forward and is starting to do what we need. And, small changes happen, and, showing up and leaving sometimes, like at the meeting, little behaviors that give you something that you're being impactful, or, somebody quoting you back. So I think from the grass up is an important thing to keep in mind when you're facilitating change. So thank you for that.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love this, and I can't believe that how this time just flew by.
Oh no.
Although I can also believe it, because it's been very fun and really interesting. And I want to. I'm definitely encouraging our listeners to check out the episode notes, because we will have that link to the 7-step framework that Andy started to describe here, so you can get into the details of that. And I also really want to encourage people to check out your podcast, Andy, Sticky from
Thank
the
you, sir.
Inside, which I was on and really enjoyed being on, and I also enjoyed listening to it. So, but I want to give you the floor once again, Andy, and ask if there's anything that you would like to leave our audience with, whether that's, recommendations, resources, or words of wisdom. The floor is yours.
Oh God, there's so many things. I think I would come back to maybe some of that first stuff I talked about. I think being kind, not nice. I think if you're generally, people in business are lovely people, really. There's very few psychos that I've encountered. And I think trying to people sometimes struggle with giving direct criticism or feedback for fear of hurting somebody. And I think if you can reframe what you're doing as helping and giving someone a chance, I think that becomes a lot easier. That really, really worked for me. The second thing I would say, and this isn't meant to sound fluffy or light, because I don't think any human leadership, any culture change is anything like fluffy. Human skills are tough, is be more generous with your praise. When we think about engagement at work, there's a band of people who sit in sort of what we would maybe call willingly compliant. They show up, they do a good job, but they don't go above and beyond. And all those people need is a little tickle. They need a little bit of recognition, a little bit of praise. And we are so conditioned to sorting out problems and going where the pain is that sometimes we forget that, praise is useful, praise is helpful. So I would encourage people to do that. And listen, if you're interested in any of this stuff, I would echo what Jerome said. There's great podcasts like this. There's amazing people who come on to sort of Sticky from the Inside to talk about their lived experience and ideas. There are great books out there. Like, I'm a massive fan of Unreasonable Hospitality, like the Will Guidara book based on 11 Madison Park,
Yes.
and Linked into the Bear. That is a book I cannot stop recommending because it sums all of the stuff we've talked about today about culture, just in beautiful stories linked to the industry that I love in hospitality. So if you're looking for a book, that is my book recommendation too.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks for all those resources. And again, listeners, you will find all of those in our episode notes. For now, I just want to thank you, Andy, for taking the time to be with us and share these insights. It's really been a joy. And thanks. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
same
Any
here.
chance to talk to you guys about this sort of stuff, I grab with two fists. No question.
Oh,
Thanks so much for
wonderful.
having me on.
Of course. And I want to remind our listeners at this point that you can leave a review of the podcast wherever you find this podcast. You will find lots of resources in the episode notes, as we mentioned. You can also go to narrative.com, which is narrative.com/podcast, where you'll find our archive of episodes, and there's no gatekeeping there. So these are all available to you with many, many guests and many insights and resources all over the website, not just with the podcasts. We do have a special gift right now for our listeners, which is a 25% discount on the on-demand self-paced storytelling training that we created in partnership with New Mexico State University's Global Campus. It's available right now, and you can do it at any time. And when you sign up, you just have to put in code NARRATIVE, NARATIV, and you'll get a 25% discount in order to learn how to find, craft, and tell stories for interviews, leadership presence, and pitches as well. So make sure and check that out. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. There's a contact page, very easy to use. We're always ready to listen to you, just as you are listening to us right now. We are very thankful for that. So thank you.
Yes.
And with that, thanks, Julienne, my wonderful co-host, and we will see you next time.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.